This is a cultural shift for telco transformation. And just to set the scene here, we know that telcos must evolve from product-orientated legacy businesses into more like agile, customer-centric, and yes, of course, AI-driven technology companies. And this transformation does require some fundamental shifts in our culture, our operating models, our talent strategies, etc. We have to unlock growth and efficiency while simultaneously managing today's business. So we are going to address, hopefully, what exactly needs to be done. And let's start by introducing our panelists. And if I can start on my far left.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning. My name's Jed Pell. I'm from Alianza. We, over a year or so ago, recently bought the Metaswitch assets. So we've have around 1,000 odd customers globally supporting their kind of core infrastructure.
Jed, thanks very much.
Hi, good morning. Gaurav Sehgal. I lead the network services for Mahindra in Europe.
Great. And
hi there, everyone. Fahim Sabir. I work for Colt, and I'm responsible for digital platform architecture and engineering.
Great.
Hi, I'm Séainín McCoy. I look after data and AI and CX in networks.
Great. Well,
happy to.
Good to have you all. Thanks so much indeed. Now, we were going to have Neil McRae as our co-host for this session. Unfortunately, Neil has had to be called away, and is very apologetic for that, unavoidable, I'm afraid. But at the end of yesterday, Neil did record his DSP Leaders address because, as those of us who are on the briefing panel can attest to, Neil had a lot to say about the subject and really wanted to convey his thoughts on this. So we are going to give Neil some quality time now because we recorded his address last night and we're going to play this out. So in lieu of Neil standing at the podium, we're going to watch Neil recorded last night. So let's have a listen to what Neil has to say on the subject.
I'm Neil McRae from CityFibre. I want to talk about culture. The telecoms industry has got itself into a really strange place, in my view. And we've been there for a while. We've somehow convinced ourselves that we aren't in technology. In fact, in some cases, that we're the dumb people in technology. Honestly, that's just not the case. In fact, we are the leaders in technology. Our industry built the largest, most resilient, most mission-critical networks on the planet. We connect countries, we connect economies, we connect businesses, we connect governments, we connect players on Fortnite, we connect banking systems, we connect nuclear power stations, we connect everyone around the world, and day in, day out, billions of transactions happen across our network. That is an amazing piece of engineering. But here's the funny thing. When other technology organizations have a bad day, it's front page news. But for us, we have the most availability in the world. Our networks reach records of reliability. When we have a problem, we take care of it and nobody notices because we have normalized engineering excellence in everything that we do. Our people are amazing. But somewhere along the line, we lost confidence in ourselves. We started listening to too many consultants, too many system integrators, too many vendors telling us what our strategy should be and what our customers wanted. We outsourced thinking, we outsourced capability, and in some cases, we practically outsourced our own belief. We then wonder why we haven't differentiated or we haven't delivered in the industry. Because the reality is this, no SI or vendor or any external organization understands your business and your customers better than your own engineers do. Nobody. I've seen organizations outsource almost everything, and the result is always the same. Expensive solutions that don't deliver, drive complexity, and ultimately, take away the value that we bring to our customers. They don't deliver what the customer wanted in the first place. Differentiation does not come from buying the same architecture as everybody else. We need to be innovative. And it comes from your own people, your own engineering teams. What does that mean? That means we as leadership, we have to change. And one of the words we need to change our use of that's become weaponized in our industry is culture. Everybody talks about culture. And candidly, when I hear the word culture, I think I hear leaders that don't understand what they should be doing because they're not listening to their engineers at the coalface. The people who truly understand how things work, where the opportunities are, and most importantly, what customers want. Today, we're building AI knowledge bases from our own IP, from our own knowledge that comes from our engineers. That's our own intellectual property. We already have it inside our organizations, but we're outsourcing this. Your engineers know way more than you realize, and getting onto the shop floor at the coalface with them is a crucially important leadership requirement so that you can learn and you can be the enabler of the amazing ideas that they've got and build that learning and deployment culture that we lack in our industry today. The job for us as leaders is enabling our expertise, challenging it, developing it, growing it, and moving it into this AI world. We also need to stop some of the madness that we have in our industry. Techco versus telco. We have been in technology forever. For 180 years we've been in technology. When I hear that debate, it kind of makes me slightly frustrating because that to me sounds like it's an organization struggling to articulate a unique vision for its customers. We in telco are 100% technology companies. We always have been. The difference is, historically, we built physical infrastructure. In the future, we're taking that amazing physical infrastructure, we're adding software to it, and we're moving into the next world of automation, orchestration, data, and artificial intelligence. We are super placed to lead in that world. And more importantly, our customers want us to lead in that world. The future telco can't just be about hardware. It has to be more than just plugging boxes together. That can't be our strategy anymore. But our value comes from how we can stitch technologies together in a way that's secure, reliable, automated, and works for the customer and the things that they want to do. We become the true enablers of our customers' technological demands. I think we also need to challenge some of our organizational thinking. For years, we created silos, product over here, engineer over there. Everyone in product should be an engineer. Everyone in engineer should be a project. The operations team, they are the customer. We need to work with them to learn what customers want. Everybody would just chuck the requirements over the wall. We've got to stop that practice because that doesn't help anybody. We must collaborate. We must bring our amazing technical people together because that is the strongest asset we have as telecommunication providers. We need to rediscover some of that innovation that we've lost over the last few years as we've got slightly out of our finest moment. And we need to think like engineers need to think like product people need to think like engineers. And we all need to deeply understand technology and what we can do it. Because if you look back when the periods of the industry was at absolute best, those were the worlds that were much closer together. I, for one, understand why telecommunications moves carefully. We run critical national infrastructure. You can't move fast and break things when you're carrying emergency calls or national connectivity that hospitals might depend upon. But there's a difference between being responsible and being completely risk averse. We must take more risks in a safe and calculated way. And again, AI gives us the ability to do that. We have become focused on the what and not on the why. And ultimately, the why is our purpose. It's why do our customers need this? And we must plug what our customers require. And when we do this, amazing things happen. We are one of the leaders in technology. We should believe this. We should put the focus into our engineering teams, and we should let them deliver amazing innovations. I've worked in this industry for 30 years. Every single year of it has been amazing, and I'm proud to be a part of this industry. We have changed the world in ways that others would not realize, and that is the culture we need to build and develop. Thank you.
Well, that was Neil McRae, CTIO of CityFibre, with his DSP Leaders address that he recorded yesterday. He did record on our extra shot stage. He wasn't somewhere in the jungle. That's our extra shot stage. He did last night. And as you heard, he's very passionate about this. And had a lot to say on the subject. I'd like to build on really what Neil was saying there. Perhaps I could start by, Jed, if I can start with you on this question of culture shift, because this is our panel, culture shift for telco transformation. Is culture shift really the issue, or is it the bigger challenge is leadership? Should we embrace our strengths and look to what we are first?
I think they go hand in hand, quite frankly. I think you have to have a leadership that's willing to change. And if we look at, how we've done things as an industry, previously, we've been very siloed, and I've certainly seen how certain organizations, when they're starting to look at actually how they change their organization, they've taken a different approach. They're breaking down the silos, having multiple different work groups, cross functions, working together to solve the problem. So, real customer engineers working with deep technical engineers at the front, in the middle, right the way through the whole process. Actually really working more of a software company and actually visualizing their organization fundamentally different and looking at squads in different ways. I think the old way of actually having network engineers who do network things, I think now we've got to think about how do we help them retrain, reevaluate how they look at the problem shift differently.
Great. Jed, thanks very much for starting us off there. And Gaurav, thank you for coming in at the last minute and standing in for Ranjan. I appreciate that. Your thoughts on this, because you're taking the SI perspective here. Do you think the biggest challenge is like leadership?
I think maybe your question has multiple layers, right? So first thing first, change is the only constant, right? And I think the culture and the mindset change is the new normal. Why I mean to say is that the way we live today in the complex environment, the network engineers of yesterday who build networks in vertical silos, they have to think horizontal. And that's a clear change of mindset which has to happen over the years. As an organization, we are building leadership mission and vision on how the AI will impact us from a delivery standpoint. And that's something which is pretty much at a leadership level. So to your question that what is more important, leadership can drive the mission and vision. Every individual employee, whether it's a supplier or a contractor or even an operator, has to think how differently we can deliver each domain, not in vertical silos, but pretty much as a team. Now, for example, AI is one area which I believe you will build horizontal. You really can't work in vertical silos. And the way we build vector squads, wherein the agents can do a planning across RAN, transport, and core at a horizontal layer is very, 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 very important and is possible. Thereby, you can save your cost to serve. That is one aspect. The efficiency will go up. It's a cultural and mindset change which has to happen from the bottoms up. So set the right mission, and the team should embrace what the leadership is asking for.
Great, thanks for that. And Fahim, this is something that we mentioned earlier about this top-down, bottom-up approach, and whether this should be a bottom-up approach to this shift, this cultural shift or leadership change.
Yeah, I mean, I think Neil touched on a really, really important topic, and that is the traditional sort of siloing of our organisations. The biggest challenge that we have is this wall that exists between the different parts of the organisation, and for some reason the intent of every part of the organisation wanting to keep its own piece and not share. As in, you'll have, let's say, for example, a platform team that's responsible for platforms, AI team responsible for AI, an IT team responsible for IT, and also the product engineering, infrastructure, etc. And there's, I think one of the biggest shifts that we need to see is actually, a flattening of organisations, to be quite honest. And I think that also one of the other areas that needs to be considered is, the leadership and management are not the same thing. We have to be creating an environment whereby we are creating leaders and not basically building hierarchies of structure whereby people get promoted into management as a way of becoming, as a way of moving forward within their careers as well.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because you're absolutely right. Leadership does not equate directly with management. Séainín, let's bring you into the discussion here. We were talking about this leadership culture shift. How do we bring in all this existing expertise we have, engineering expertise, into what is an increasingly AI-driven organisation?
I think one of the key things is to be really outcome focused. That's what leadership can do. Say, what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve and how do we get there? Rather than attempting to AIfy kind of processes that we have already, we're looking at where we can deploy AI within our networks. It's actually looking at what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And then actually the change curve that you bring people on shifts, because you're giving people an opportunity to look at where they can retrain. You're giving them an opportunity to use their incredibly valuable expertise and bring that skill set and augment that skill set. And that's a fundamentally different way to think about your talent management. It's a fundamentally different way to think about how you bring somebody along a journey rather than just adding AI in. That will be one of the key shifts, and the culture moves along with that.
Great, thanks. And I'm really building on this. Fahim, let me come straight back to you, because one of the other things that was brought up earlier was like confidence. We've got a big pedigree, huge pedigree, years and years of expertise in this business, and we hear so often in the past about the move to techco or the Google clone type of approach, and yet really, do we just have to dig deep and rediscover our core strengths?
I think to a degree, definitely. The statement I will make is, in our industry, what we do is actually really hard, and we're actually really good at it. And we seem to kind of lose sight of that on a regular basis when we're talking about how we need to transform as an industry. And like it was said, always a difficult act to follow, Neil, because he basically puts it all out there. But this whole idea of we've always been technology companies. The biggest thing, I think, in terms of the techco dream, if you like, is like becoming one of the modern technology companies. The big cloud providers or whoever else. I think there is a different style in terms of how those organisations operate, in the fact that there is a much wider democratization of technology and democratization of activity within the organisation to build, to experiment and the such like. So, I think that's the bit where we need to kind of move forward towards how the broader sport technology industry actually operates, but we also have to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that, what we do is really, really hard and we're really good at it. And we need to basically be able to wield that to become even better.
Great points, and let's move on, because the two of you work with the telcos in different ways. Jed, maybe I can start with you. Slightly unfair by telling telcos what they should do, but do you feel that telcos really should not try and become the techco technology company, and that it's like focusing on what they've got, their engineering expertise in-house?
I think you brought up some great points. So you also, I think rediscover confidence is an interesting kind of emotional context, because I actually think service providers are the trusted source for most customers. If you think about who's your trusted source out of the, you'd argue your Googles, your Microsoft, etc. People will always naturally gravitate towards a telco because you know who they are, they're regulated, probably one of the most, apart from pharmaceuticals, one of the most regulated industries. And I think actually the reality is that stands for an awful lot. And I'm proud to be part of that industry in any shape or form. So I think, as a telco, I think that's absolutely a key critical part. Do we need to emulate what, as an industry, what the large organisations like Google are doing? No. I think there's certain value properties that telco can bring, but it can't be done on our own. It has to be kind of with partnerships in different ways, and I don't mean with vendors specifically, but actually I think the thought innovation is currently happening outside some of the telco environment, and it's a question of how do you bring that into bear. And I think that's probably one of the kind of conversations we'll have a bit later on about how you service your customers and look at them in a different way.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. Gaurav?
Yeah, this is a long-standing debate that whether we should be a techco or a telco. I think from a subscriber perspective, right, they come to a company to buy networks. They want to get secure connectivity, which is resilient, which is scalable. That's about it. They don't care whether you're techco or a telco. I think the fundamental point here is that it's a both convergence in the sense that the fundamentals of the telecom industry is about giving great connectivity at great price and the consumer experience and network experience. As long as you can give these two together to your consumers and subscribers, you have achieved your North Star, both in terms of driving ARPUs, revenues, and also the kind of efficiencies you want to give to your customers. That's about it. That's the fundamental bottom line we should probably address as an industry, in my view.
Okay, great. Thanks very much indeed. Let's sort of keep building on this, because another question is, have telcos outsourced too much in the past? Have they had too much reliance on their partners? I guess it also depends on the size of the telco operation, because not all telcos have the resources themselves. Séainín, maybe I can ask you if there are certain capabilities that you see that telcos really do need to keep and focus on if they really want to become these digital service providers that we talk about here.
I think one of the key things is really looking at that differentiated customer experience and what do our customers actually want. So as we said, customers are less interested in whether somebody's a telco or a techco, but actually, they want great connectivity and they want great experiences. So having that intelligence around how to provide that exceptional customer experience both in and out of the home, I think that's really, really key. And being able to understand what our customers need from us, bringing our engineers closer to our product people, closer to those customer outcomes is really fundamental. And I think that's a really key space for us to focus on.
Great. Gaurav, is that the nature of the SI relationship? Is that changing? Because we are reliant upon telcos are reliant on their vendor partners and their systems integrator partners. It's an important part of their business. Are you seeing things change, perhaps?
Yep, I think never ever in the last so many decades of life, SIs have been more relevant to the telecom industry. And why I say so, because with the advent of cloud 10 years ago in the network domain and now with AI, you need ecosystem partners. No company today can do everything on their own, right? And there has to be a cohesive relationship between the suppliers, component providers, and these operators and SI. You can get the best infrastructure from the best companies in the world. The consumers can use whatever it is. You want an orchestration company like SI who will come and build this all together. Build right operating models, build right networks, bring IT networks together. And if you don't do that as an industry, I'm sure we're not getting there right. So we have to bring all this together. And as an SI, our role is to really pivot towards the operators to say, build a very cloud native architectures. Try and break silos. Bring new operating models which are very, very harmonized towards horizontalization. That is one. And I think AI will play a very critical role, which cloud could not do 10 years ago. We built vertical clouds, private cloud, hyperscaler clouds. IT network is still siloed. I think to me, AI is one area which is going to break all of it. And that's an area we should all invest together and really go together. So the reskilling of skills, getting more people to train on AI models. Why can't we do a domain-centric, LLMs? Why should we have to do LLMs from different companies? Why can't a company build a domain-specific service LLMs, which are specific to that industry, to that domain, which are really happening in the market? So I think lots to be done. And as an SI, we really can do all of it together.
Great. Fahim, are we overthinking this in a way? Because we do fixate a bit about how much we should do in-house, how much we should outsource, how much we should partner. At the end of the day, it's delivering what the customer wants, the service the customer wants, the experience the customer wants. Is it really irrelevant who actually does this, so long as it gets done, or really should we be focusing more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I'm going to try to answer it in a way that's sort of not overly controversial.
Well, we don't mind a bit of controversy. I mean, if Neil was here, there'd be a bit of controversy.
There'd definitely be some. So you asked the question a little bit earlier, which was all around, have we lost confidence in ourselves? And, I would argue to a degree, our reliance, that basically the shift of reliance has happened towards our ecosystem partners, and we've kind of not kept enough of that accountability ourselves in terms of what actually gets engineered. And as a result, that's caused us to lose confidence because, we now have got to the point whereby actually, because there have been other people doing this stuff for us for such a long time, that we don't believe that we can do it ourselves anymore. When in reality, if you go to inside any service provider and you can have conversation with lots of people, they will tell you exactly what is wrong with the place. Yeah, exactly what needs resolving, exactly what needs to be fixed, and it's not. You don't have to walk very far before you can get an opinion in terms of even how to fix it. So, I think that's really, really important. SIs are an absolutely critical part of the telecoms ecosystem. Bring a lot of expertise. Also, they also bring an amount of broad thinking. It's just about kind of swinging that pendulum of ownership back towards the actual service providers themselves, so that basically SIs become partners to deliver rather than being given all the accountability to basically make things happen, which can be the case today.
That's great. That's very interesting. And Jed, let's pick up on this, shall we?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting kind of questions of telcos outsource too much of their intelligence. I'd probably be, not quite as controversial as Neil. I'd argue the customers have made that choice. Customers are rooting around service providers right now because of time. They can get things quicker, more rich, and there's services that they can get from other network elements or partners are much richer. And they go around the service provider. The question we have is, how do we help the service provider enable those rich services that customers are requesting and needing? Again, I think very often we elevate to the large enterprise world and think about that's where the panacea is. But a GDP of a country around 58% of that is built of SMBs. Are we really innovating in that environment as a telco and as an infrastructure providers to deliver services down to a dentistry? Do we really fundamentally understand their workflow to be able to service them? The answer is probably not. So they'll go to somebody who does and charge $400 a seat. I think that's fundamentally where we kind of get to, is it about intelligence? I actually would argue customers have really kind of moved and started to make a choice of who delivers and delivers on time and quickly, and what they need.
Thanks, Jed. Fahim, do you want to come back on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really, really great point. But, I believe that the customers have voted with their feet because telcos have been a little bit, service providers, shall I say, have been a little bit slow on the uptake. One of the things I find absolutely fascinating is if you look at every sort of technological shift that's happened over let's say, for example, the last 25 years, cloud, smartphones, AI, whatever you want to talk about, everything is underpinned by network infrastructure. Without the network, none of it works. But the reality is, if you look at them, we enable every digital industry. But for some reason, we are one of the least digitized industries ourselves. And I think that is what causes customers to vote with their feet and goes elsewhere, because, we don't give them the convenient experience that we need to be able to give them in order for them to, do what they want to be able to do in a way that, has as little friction as is possible. So, and I think all of these topics are all related to each other. So, and again, it's more about basically taking ownership of that and accountability of that engineering and actually just making things happen, and that is a very much a bottom-up activity.
Great. And Séainín, if the telcos do more on that experience, as we've just heard, will that in turn give more confidence to the teams, to the engineering teams, to the workforce, and we'll start to rediscover what made telcos great?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's a natural feedback loop there, wherever when you see your innovation come to fruition, then you see that being used really well by your customers, and you get that natural feedback loop, and that builds a lot of confidence within teams. And actually, we see that quite a lot whenever we have innovation that's either been born from an engineering team, that's been brought to a product team, and then worked in collaboration with the product team, and then come to life. You really see the buy-in from the team that's built it right through to the product team, and then that feedback into customers. And then once you have that flywheel starting to build momentum, you can see that reinforce itself back into how you can retrain people within the organization, how you can create more opportunities, and it opens up new avenues, because a lot of the great ideas that we have for our customers actually do come from engineering. And that really great collaboration then back into product to get a better understanding understanding of what customers need to be able to service the dentistry industry, or to be able to service healthcare. More broadly, you can get that feedback loop coming directly back in. Great.
And does the increase in AI within internally and externally with the customers, does that create excitement internally within the organisation, or is it another pressure and it leads to issues?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because we talk about AI shaping the culture of within our industry, but AI shaping the culture everywhere. So it's not unique to us as an industry. It's also not unique to someone's experience in work. It's someone's experience in life. So whenever we're thinking about how we can introduce AI, we're actually thinking about it from an AI fluency perspective. So what does everybody need to understand? What does everybody need to know, so that everybody has a base level of experience and then can build on that? I think there's a really important point to meet people with empathy on where they are on their journey. Some people rightly feel that they're being potentially, they're worried about AI. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing for people to be worried about. But then on the other side, we have really great engineers who are really excited about what they can do and are forging ahead. And we heard in the earlier panel about people talking about POCs, and the amount of POCs, the amount of ideas that there are in telco is huge. There's a huge excitement, but it's being able to bottle that excitement and then being able to pick the ideas that are going to have real conversion for our customers as well. So I'd say, from an organizational perspective, there's real excitement, and there's momentum, and there's a real drive to want to understand how people can use AI, not just in their work life, but also more broadly as well. And I think it's a really great opportunity, and we have a responsibility to help people on that journey as well.
Great to hear. Very encouraging to hear. And I think that's probably a good time for us to maybe go to the audience and get some feedback here. This cultural shift for telco transformation. I think in the far right, I see a hand in the far right this time. Here we go. There's a microphone just coming to your left.
Hello. Thank you very much. Question I would address to Neil, but obviously he's not here. So for him, to you, one of the things Neil touched on was organisational changes. And he kind of described a sort of DevOps model, but more broadly throughout the whole business. How far would you take that? Would you advocate something as extreme as maybe the Spotify model?
Right.
Great question.
Yeah.
Maybe not that extreme, to be honest with you. I do think, like I was saying before, I think that there is a need to flatten organisations and, make organisations more responsible for things from an end-to-end basis, all the way from, engineering all the way through to operating. Be responsible for defining the customer experience all the way to actually building it and actually be able to run it in production. I think that basically we kind of related to another topic, and one which is actually pretty close to my heart, and that is that we always talk about platforms and the such like, right? So when you become a much more of a platform business, I believe that your organizational structure will shift anyway, because you can't have silos who don't talk to each other trying to do different things. So you've got to build something on a common stack, and that means the fact that you have to be structured differently.
I'll just come in on that. On the Spotify model, I think that was an interesting thought paper from Spotify, and it wasn't really the model that they worked within themselves, but some of that language has made its way into lots of organisations, and including into ours. So we talk about working in a tribe model in some spaces, and actually we see that model being really successful when you have integrated squads of people, where you have a product person, you have your engineers, you have everybody together working towards a common goal. That's when we see us move most effectively and in the quickest way possible. And that can be really, really effective. But I think this comes back to the confidence point. It doesn't need to be the Spotify model. It can be whatever, insert your company name model, have the confidence to have your own model and have the confidence to really stand behind that and say, this is what works for us. This is how we present ourselves, and this is how we roll this out across our organization. And I think that's really important. Having a homogenous nature to your culture really, really helps to break down those silos that we know exist within the industry.
So for those maybe not as familiar, what was Spotify advocating?
So Spotify talk about a tribe model, and it talks about both chapters and squads. So inside a tribe, you're responsible for a product, and then within those squads, you have everybody that you need in order to develop a single feature. The chapters then are your skills resource, so it becomes like a matrix management model. So you have chapters of software engineers, chapters of data engineers, chapters of product managers, and then you blend those together into a virtual organization that is then able to enact decisions independently of a central function.
Great, thanks, Shani, for explaining that for us. Gaurav, do you want to?
Yeah, maybe in the TechM parlance, sorry.
Yeah, go on, Karen.
In the TechM parlance, we are calling them vector squads. Okay, so the way the future of the network or the org will look like is more of a vector squad, which will be a combination of agents, people, and tasks they will deliver. And they're similar to tribes because you have the individual tasks you will deliver, and it's going to be a combination of all three of them. Human in loop is something which is going to become a reality, and that's how you will deliver your outcomes.
Great, and this is an important factor to introduce into the conversation there. I'm pleased you've done so. Jed, any thoughts about how far we need to push these organisational changes?
Yeah, I think actually one of the organisations we've worked with that have done this really well is Deutsche Telekom. I think they're pretty open about how they've changed their organisation, really to emulate what you was talking about with the Spotify model, and that's fundamentally changed how they bring services to market, the speed, the agility. I mean, it's been a massive functional shift for them as well. So I think it's fundamentally changed the organisation, but it's been, ground up, accepted, and the way that they're approaching things, I think, is from a vendor point of view, you can see how they can move things a little quicker than what they used to be. So yeah, I think it's a real kind of shining light.
Great.
But the interesting part about the whole, without going completely down this track, going back to the point that you made, the whole interesting part about the Spotify model is Spotify designed that model for themselves because it was something that would work for them. And again, it all comes down to that confidence factor. We, as an industry, we should be designing operating models for ourselves based upon what we need to work with in our own organizations, based upon the culture of our organizations, and not the idea of running off I think the idea of running off a blueprint is now somewhat past, and we're now at this interesting inflection point whereby we need to take a good hard look at ourselves and get to that point whereby a new blueprint might emerge.
That's really interesting. Thanks very much. We do have another question, so I want to get another question in. I think it's from the back corner there.
Yeah, here in the back. Ohad from Amdocs. My question is mainly for Séainín, but happy for anyone to address. So a lot of discussion about build versus buy, in-source versus outsource, transforming the organization. When you are looking at your data and AI strategy for transforming AI network plus all the culture, what are you expecting your vendors, partners to come with in order to make you more successful business outcome and accelerate the journey?
That's an interesting question, because I think it really comes down to what is the use case and what is the outcome that we're trying to drive. So in those three options of the model, build, buy, or borrow, what we really look at is what is the right solution for that use case and what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. So what we expect from partners and vendors to come along with is that appreciation that it won't be a one-size-fits-all, that there will be different levels of nuance depending on whether we're focusing on something from an IT perspective or whether we're focusing on development into the network as well. We look for the adaptability of the solutions. We look for how open those solutions can be. Like, are we able to, we talked about models earlier on and being able to switch between different frontier model providers. That's a really important, it's a really important thing for us to have, to be able to select what is the right model for the right job and not just be boxed into a certain set of choices. So I think it's really coming with openness and a willingness to work with us and to work with us in the organizational model that we have as well, and to kind of get stuck in and embedded with us, rather than coming and say, right, we're going to give you a solution and here, this is the solution, and kind of off you go. So that's, does that answer your question? I'm not sure if I've answered that. Yeah, okay.
Yes, I think it does. Great, thanks very much. Any more thoughts from the other perspective? Maybe what you're hearing from your partners, your telcos, what they expect from you, relationships? Gaurav?
I think that flexibility is absolutely key when we're talking to potential customers. Is what they come back to us is how flexible can you be, and not just in product evolution, but actually how we approach the the services and work actually hand in glove with them to develop and design some of this, because some of it is new. It is newly designed. Getting real-time applications working in different places that haven't been done before are certainly fundamentally different and need that kind of strong partnership and flexibility to do things differently. So we've definitely seen that.
I think the operators are looking at TechM or SIs as change agents. I think more like how can we come and change their operating models, the org structures, their to-be architectures, because all the OEMs will speak to them for the technology stack, right? So we are coming more from a company which is more driven at the autonomous layer. So how can we bring their network operations to autonomy or level 4? So all the data, the AI, the people, the skill, the tooling is something we are good at. And that's something we bring all this together with outcomes. That's very important, because without outcomes, there's no discussion today.
Great, thanks very much. Fahim, do you want to add or?
Yeah, I think I'll add a little bit. I mean, repeating, I think most of what's already been said. So there is I'm not a believer in the fact that you build everything, you buy everything, or you borrow everything. I mean, it's always going to be a mix of all of the three things. Why would we spend our energy building something which is, quite difficult to build, exists, and doesn't really have too much variance in terms of real sort of business value, if you like, it's much more from a commodity point of view, from our point of view. One of the things that we kind of have two things that we care about. So first of all, a recognition by our suppliers, our vendors, our partners, that we are not the same as every other provider out there. We do have different sets of concerns. We do have, different customer groups and the such. Like the secondary part, which is super, super important, is making sure that we have open access to data that lives inside tools that we buy. That is absolutely critical. In terms of where we are at the moment, in terms of the actual, the top end, and how we actually, build intelligence across everything, that is something that we are building within Colt ourselves at the moment. That's where we will build. We won't build everything, but we certainly want to have ownership of that top level. So, having openness to that data, making sure that we have agents, MCP servers, etc., so that we can actually control what's actually happening in those applications. That's kind of the key thing that we're looking for from vendors at the moment.
Great.
I'll just add to that. It's, as you said, it's the observability and the explainability and the repeatability of the solutions. Those are the three things that we need to see consistently, and be able to, from a regulated perspective, be able to answer to that as well. That's really, really fundamental.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Tony, do you have another question from the audience? Do you have another hand up
question
there?
Over there, excuse me.
Some on the right, is that? Yeah, over here. Thank you very much. Sorry, Tony.
Hello, Anna Lester, Dell Technologies here. I just wanted to ask, obviously it's great to hear there's a lot of excitement around AI, but as sort of customers that I work with, there is a lot of nervousness around it, especially in wider teams across the organisations. And I just wondered, do you think that we are getting stuck in defining AI as the goal, when AI, I guess the goal is better decision making? And do you see this across your organisation, like sales teams, etc.? And how do we start shifting the messaging wider across the organisation?
Great. Thanks so much for the question. Séainín, are you able to maybe take this first?
So I think that's a really valid question, and I think in some places there's definitely AI is the goal rather than looking for the outcome, and that is a cultural shift, both from an engineering perspective and a leadership perspective, to make sure that we're laser focused on what is the outcome. It is not always the answer isn't always going to be AI. The answer, I think Neil mentioned it earlier, might just be good old automation. We have been in and around AI as an industry for decades. Generative AI exploded. Generative AI opened up AI to the population much more broadly, and give an idea that there's this huge shift. And while there might be a huge shift from a generative perspective, there's still a lot that can be done with automation. So I think on that sort of, how do you make sure that AI isn't the goal? It is really asking the basic question: what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve? What is it going to do for our customers? And what is the return on this level of investment? And if you can answer those three questions positively, then yes, that might be the right way to go. But it always has to be balanced against, the broader demand that you have within your organization, and I would say that AI isn't the goal. The goal is to do the best thing for your customers and to deliver what you set out to do. So less than just wanting to put AI in places.
Yeah, great, and it's a really valid question. Anyone wants to pick up on?
Yeah, I mean, I can add to that. So, I mean, at Colt, we have actually got a process in place which basically allows people to submit what they believe are AI use cases for evaluation. And the first question that gets asked about these use cases is, actually, does this need AI? You know, that's the basic question. There's a lot that basically get pushed out, and they say, no, this is just an automation thing. You know, this is just a scripting thing. This is an RPA thing. This is whatever sort of thing, right? And then now, and we do get cases whereby, well, we do get quite a few cases whereby AI is actually a solution. I mean, as an industry, we go through these shifts, and we go through these shifts on a pretty regular basis. And, you know, it's we're currently at the, it doesn't matter what the question is, AI is the answer phase at the moment. And you know, it will pass, to be honest with you, in my opinion.
Great. Any more thoughts?
I think in my view, not everything can be automated. Okay, let's be clear, because in a planning function, in a RAN environment, right, you can just automate up to a 40% limit because you still need human intervention to do pre-configuration, pre-planning, and so on and so forth. So I think let's be very clear. What can we automate to what extent? As long as we get this baseline right, you can get to the right outcomes the way you really want it. That's a fundamental point I would like to say here.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that. And we are only about a couple of minutes away from the end of our session, so I just want to come down the panel if I can. One final point to sort of round this out, this whole cultural shift business. Is there like one piece of advice you can give to telcos out there, other telcos, how to become more agile, how to become more customer centric without losing, as Neil says, the DNA of providing critical infrastructure as we move to become DSPs? You know, what's the one thing that we should all focus on? And Jed, maybe I could start.
Yeah, I think the key thing for me is really customer centric focus and being agile and thinking about how you can be agile to solve the customer problems and really understand the customer. The question behind the question. I think that's fundamentally one of the challenges, I think, as an industry, we often forget. We think we know what the customer wants. And actually, in reality, it's very rare do we sit down and deep dive across a broad breadth of that customer segment and understand what they really need and why they need it. And I think fundamentally, that's one of the things I think, for me, I would look at how we approach that as an industry. Think about the customer, how can we be more agile within the constraints of actually what we have from a critical national infrastructure, if that's where we come from, or otherwise. I think that's the key thing for me.
Great, thanks, Jed. Gaurav?
From my perspective, I think simplify things, okay, and decommission legacy as fast as you can. I mean, these two things can really help us to embrace AI, and once we do that, outcomes are there.
Great, thanks very much. Fahim?
Okay, I'm going to try to say something a little bit random here. So, sort out how you finance stuff, because everything stems from how you finance things. You know, reality is if you're going to operate on a sort of a large business case with a defined outcome, a defined cost model, then agility becomes a real problem. You know, from that stage forward, you've got to introduce the flexibility at that stage onwards. You've got to have a recognition of change. You've got to, you've just got to be able to support the way that you actually finance initiatives, so that basically, you can actually deal with change. And the second thing is, as Jed said, make sure that the voice of the customer is in the room.
Great, thanks very much. That's a good point. And Séainín, final thought from you about how we instigate and how we safely transition this cultural shift.
So I totally agree. The customer has to have a seat at the table. That's really, really fundamental. And I also think in our industry, technology isn't really ever the problem. We've got great technologists, but what we have to put in is the right change and adoption wrap around that. So how do we actually bring colleagues on a journey? How do we bring our customers on our journey with us around how we're changing and really focus on that? That is as fundamental as introducing new technology into the organisation. So when you have that customer voice at the table and then you understand how that's going to be managed by colleagues, then that comes together, and that's a really powerful change then in an organisation.
Fantastic. Well, great advice from all of you. Thanks so much indeed. That is all the time we have for this session. We must end it there. So let's have a round of applause for our panelists, please. Thank you.